All right, moving on. So wrapping up cell, okay, we are moving into tissue, okay? Okay, well, let me write and review copy, fetch, fail. Okay, Elliot, Kim, I can review one. You can stay back after class. I can help you with it, okay? So follow the note. All right, really quick before we talk about tissue, you gotta remember, right? The smallest things are chemical level, right? Atoms. And when you have these atoms bond together, you get molecule, right? And then these molecules will then go on create a cell, right? They make up a cell. And a cell is the smallest, the most basic part of a living thing, right? It's actually living. And then you have cells that do the same job. They kind of like skin cell, muscle cell, or heart cell. They have the same job. And when they have the same job, they connect to each other and they become what we call tissue, right? Tissue. And then those tissue will then go on to combine with other same tissue to make an organ, and then an organ system, and then the whole organism. And remember, that's the level organization, okay? All right, moving on, okay? Today we talk about tissue. There are 4 types of tissue, all right, in our body. So all the organs in our body are combined or divided into 4 tissue, okay? And they are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue or neural tissue or your nervous system, right? Epithelial tissue would be like your skin part. Connective tissue will be kind of like your fat layers, your cartilage, and so on. And then you have a muscle tissue, right? Make up your muscle. And then you have nervous tissue that make up your nervous system, like your brain, your spinal cord, your other neuron, and so on. So all the organs in our body are divided into 4 types of tissue. So for example, the heart would be a muscle tissue. The skin would be epithelial tissue, right? Fat, cartilage, tendon, that'll be your connective tissue. Make sense? So that's the only 4 tissue in our body. Today we're gonna focus on epithelial tissue. This week we're gonna focus on epithelial tissue. So we're gonna go from inside out, outside in, right? And the first layer are the skin. You have skin, yeah. And we call them epithelial tissue. It's not just skin only, by the way, there's other things too, right? Check to make sure we have enough time. 4 more minutes, so let's see if we can get over for a few more. Okay. Epithelial are layer that cell cover the internal external surface, like I said, skin, right? Also layer that cover different organs as well. And they also form glands. We'll talk about glands later on when we talk about sexual reproduction system. But technically these are structures that produce secretion. So in your skin, you also have gland, like your sweat gland. That will be the most simple gland because it secretes sweat, right? You have tear gland, right? Okay. So you have gland, and that is part of the epithelial tissue. Okay. What is the function, the job of epithelial tissue? Their job is to provide physical protection, okay, like our skin. They control permeability. Permeability means things go in and out. Permeability. It provides sensation of feeling, right? Our skin, right? We can feel. It produces specialized secretion, right? Secrete sweat gland, it secretes salt, right? It secretes tear and so on. Okay. So those are the 4 jobs of the epithelial tissue. Right? Characteristic, like how do they look like, or what things make up these epithelial tissue? First thing is cellularity, cell junction. How do we characterize them is how they connect. Cell junction, how do they connect? Polarity mean positive, negative, right? Or in this case, the top or the bottom part. Apical, or what we call basal part. Basal, root word is base, like the base, the bottom. Apical is more like the top part. Apical surface, top, base, bottom. Okay. We can also describe them or distinguish them by attachment. How do they connect to each other? And regeneration, how do they regenerate? Like a skin cell will regenerate, right?
Okay, the first thing is tight junction. Okay, tight junction are these spots. You see, tight, kind of like literally connected. Between two plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is like the cell membrane. Remember, every cell, there's a cell membrane surrounding the cell, or AKA plasma membrane. So a tight junction is when you have two epithelial cells and their cell membrane kind of connect. It prevents passage from water and solutes. In making sure that things are not, see, it kind of create a gap here. It make sure that things are not leaking from one cell to another. It's kind of create like a membrane that kind of like keep things in one cell from another. Okay, so the word that you should highlight is prevent, right? It prevent. And it isolate, right? It isolate, making sure that the two epithelial cells or tissue, remember epithelial cells make up tissue, are not leaking through. Things are not moving back and forth, okay? That's the tight junction, to make things tight, so nothing leak. Hopefully you remember that word. Gap junction, on the other hand, right here, see tight junction right there? You see tight junction? Gap junction, on the other hand, allow communication, allow things to go back and forth between the two epithelial cells to make up the tissue, right? It allow ions, it allow molecule to travel from one cell to the other. So that's their job. For example, coordination of a heart contraction, right? Heart tissue require gap junction because it communicates. So that way your heart, all the cell in your heart to make up the heart tissue are beating the same time, right? Are beating the same time, because if one heart cell is beating a different rhythm and another one is the opposite rhythm, then you're gonna have heart murmur or heart problem. So keep that in mind. And then the third thing is desmosome. So what is desmosome, right? This is a spot desmosome. This is a hemidesmosome. Hemi because it's semi, half. It is a dense area. It cement. The key word is cement. It cement and it tie the two epithelial cell together. It kind of hold them together because these cells, remember, they come and they work together, so they need to stick to each other, right? So desmosome is where you allow them to attach more. Think of your skin cell, right? Your epithelial skin cell is part of epithelial, right? They are not moving apart from each other. They held on tight to each other because of the desmosome. So the general function is that it cement the two cells together. It allow twisting and bending, but it still stay together. Make sense? And you can't remove them. And that is desmosome. Later on, when you guys go to college and you learn about physiology and anatomy, they're gonna go in depth. Hemidesmosome, spot desmosome. But right up now, just remember desmosome. And I'm sure by the time the year is over, you probably remember only 10% of physiology, which is fine, because the next time you hear desmosome again, it will click. Your brain will pick it up faster, right? Because this is the first time you probably hear that word, okay? And that's how learning works. Repetition, repetition, repetition. And you just add on more things to it. All right, this is another example, hemidesmosome. Hemidesmosome, again, their job is to allow flexibility. Oh no, that means that spot. But hemi is at the bottom. It kind of hold the epithelial cell to the basement, to the base of the tissue, okay? Like this. All right, the next thing is, how do we classify epithelia or epithelium tissue? How do we classify them? By the way, sometimes you hear the word epithelium, that means one tissue or one cell. When you hear epithelia, that means plural, mean many. Same thing like bacteria. When people say the word bacteria, that means many bacteria. If they talk about one bacteria, mean they have to say bacterium. Okay, so keep that in mind. Singular and plural. So how do epithelia classify? How do we categorize them? We categorize them by two things: on shape and layers. You will hear squamous epithelia. It means this cell will be flat, thin and flat. We'll have picture later. Cuboidal mean they are square like a cube. Columnar mean they like a cube, but they are taller, like a rectangular. And then you also classify them by layer. Are they simple? That means one layer only. Or are they stratified? That means multiple layers stacked on top of each other. Make sense? And that's how we classify epithelial cell. And of course, it's not going to be easy when you look at a real cell, but just try to remember this. Okay, let's take a look at their picture. All right. Again, simple mean one layer. Okay. Remember, epithelial tissue are always the external, the outer one, like your skin. And then anything underneath would be what we call the connective tissue, like fats, cartilage, right? And we'll talk about that when we come back from break. But these are the epithelial. This is what we call simple squamous epithelia because it's squamous, it's flat. It's only one layer. This is what we call cuboidal, cube, like a little cube. Not exact like a cube, but it looked like a cube. Simple again, so one layer. And this is what we call columnar, epithelial, simple columnar, because only one layer. And again, down here would be the connective tissue. But we will focus on that later. Right now, we're just focusing on the epithelium. Again, think of skin. Okay, when I say epithelium, think of skin. And we know that there's other things in your body that are surrounded by epithelial tissue as well. But right now, to make things simple, think of skin. And then you also have stratify. This is stratify right here. You have flat, but multiple layers, more than one layer. This is stratify cuboidal, like a cube, but multiple layers. Columnar, a column, and then kind of followed by the cuboidal, but we still call it columnar because the outermost layer is like a column, okay? And that's how we classify epithelial tissue, skinish. All right. I'm gonna go over this quick. The first is squamous epithelia. Again, squamous means flat. You have two types. Again, you have simple, that means just one layer, or you have stratified multiple layers. Right. A job is more absorption. Sin is so flat, it's thin. It allows things to absorb. So it kind of line any organs or any part of your body where things can go in and out because it's thin. Famous as well, but we talk about stratify. Instead of one layer, you have multiple layers. When you have multiple layers, it means it's thick, right? Because it's multiple layer. Thick. Stratified squamous epithelium is more for protection against attack. Like your tongue. Your tongue have stratified squamous epithelium because your tongue are in contact with a lot of food, right? So you want to have multiple layers. So in case some layer are scraped up, then you have other layer. Make sense? And by the way, everybody look down here. These are epithelial tissue. These are connective tissue. We'll talk about that next time. Okay. So if the word that I want to highlight or circle for Stratify is it adds strength and resistance, right? It protect, it's thicker, okay? And they still squamous because they look like flattened out boxes. Okay. Moving on. So don't answer that question. We're just gonna move on to the next one so we have enough time. The next one is what we call cuboidal epithelia, like a cube. So there are two types again, symbol and stratify. Symbol mean one layer. Stratify mean multiple layer. Normally where do you find them? It's more for secretion and absorption. For sweat ducts and mammary ducts. Don't respond to this as well. I'm just gonna skip this very fast, okay? For example, your kidney. Within your kidney, you have these tubes, right? Their job is to carry urine and blood, right? This is where you filter blood waste into your urea, into your urine. These are ducts. So symbol cuboidal, see, like a cube. I know it's a little, again, it's not, when you look at a real tissue, it's not going to look like a cube for you, right? You're not gonna look for something that look like exactly like a cube. And then columnar. Columnar are divided to actually three. You have a symbol columnar. That means just one layer like this. It has to do primarily intestinal lining, your intestine. Your intestine have a lot of columnar. It's long like a column. This is symbol because only one layer. Okay, your intestine. And by the way, this is connective tissue down here. Okay. And then you also have stratify columnar. That means multiple layer for protection. Symbol because it's only one layer, so it absorbs things to go in and out. So you notice if we generalize this, symbol mean one thin layer, so thing can go in and out easily. So it's more absorption and secretion. Stratify on the other hand, multiple, so it's more protection, thick. And then for columnar, you also have what we call pseudo stratify columnar. Pseudo means false. That means they are not really stratified. Stratify means multiple layer, right? Stratify. Pseudo mean, nah, they kind of in between the symbol and stratify. Let me see, there's an example. Right here. This is stratify, you see? Multiple, columnar at first. See, columnar. This is lumen, this is the tube right here. This is the surrounding. And this has to do with your, this has to do with your salivary gland duct. This is the tube that releases saliva. They are columnar. You see column. And then they have stratify, some more layer down here, even though it don't look like columnar, but anytime you see something that just the column on the top and then the bottom, it can be any shape. This is stratify. This on the other hand is pseudo because it kind of, it doesn't have a specific multiple layer. You see this has, you can kind of see multiple layers, 3 different layers here. 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer. This is pseudo because this is 1 layer, but this is kind of like, yeah, it's kind of smushed in. Make sense? And that's why we call this pseudo stratify. This has to do with your trachea. Your trachea has to do with your breathing tube, right? Trachea, and it has pseudo stratify. Okay, don't worry if you don't remember where these guys belong to in your body. We will have more practice. Okay, so the point is you understanding that if it's symbol, that means it's thin. That means it has to do with like absorption and secretion because things are allowed to go in and out. If it's stratified, I mean it's multiple layer, so it has to do more like with protection. So try to generalize these epithelial tissue.